We're talking with Steve Gardes. We had a chance to speak with him a little bit last Friday, and we were talking about this conversation that is ongoing about the Convention of States resolution. All right, so Mr. Gardes, first off, good morning, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Bernie.
Appreciate it. All right, real quick, just give people an idea of how you got kind of involved and started in this.
I really got involved last year in the Convention of States project when this resolution came before the state legislature last year, and it passed the House overwhelmingly, and it kind of caught my attention. I said, well, this is pretty interesting. And I was thinking it would be a slam dunk that the state of Louisiana would have passed it. And then all of a sudden the legislative session was over. It didn't pass. And 3 weeks later I read an article in the Morning Advocate, and it said Louisiana taxpayers, voters need to find out what happened. And bottom line, it got assigned to the wrong committee, and it never got out of the Senate committee, so it never made its way to the Senate floor. So it didn't pass. And kind of went ballistic at that point.
So we would need every state to do this, or 66%?
You need two-thirds of the states, which means we need to have 34 states to call for an identical resolution. And we started the year off with only 4. 3 more states have joined in already. We're up to 7. And tomorrow afternoon, Louisiana could become the 8th state in the nation to call for a convention.
This convention basically would be Louisiana would decide about their delegates, each individual state would, and then you come together, these delegates come together and talk about our Constitution?
Exactly. Really, it's talk about the problems that the country is having and on whether the rules of the game, i.e. our Constitution, needs to be changed.
Should we tweak it? Should we take stuff away, add stuff into it?
Right. And so the resolution that's before that all 50 states are presenting are limited in scope, basically to take back the power that the federal government has taken above and beyond that was granted to it and bring it back to we the people, bring it back to the state legislators. And so that's, in essence, what it's about.
Tell me about the next generation, if you will. We had a chance just briefly to kind of hint at this, but there was testimony, some sophomores from STM. I mean, it's not like just folks like you and me saying, hey, this is a very interesting idea. Hey, the people actually still have power. Tell me about these young people.
It's actually most probably the more uplifting part of the story, actually. And so Senator Page Cortez and I had spoken to Page back in December about this Article 5 process and whether he would be supportive of it and help me in that endeavor. And he challenged me. He said, I tell you what, Steve, let's go talk to some high school civics classes, and let's see if we can't get them and challenge them. And if they, too, think that it's time to have a convention of the states to talk about the problems of the country, then I'm going to ask them to come to the Capitol and to give testimony. And we did that. We spoke to civics classes at St. Thomas More as well as ESA. And so it's about 70, 80 students in total that we gave our Article 5 presentation. And lo and behold, when it came time, we had 2 students that actually stepped up, accepted the challenge, and not only did they give testimony, I would go so far as to say they gave key testimony. With that, to kind of set the atmosphere, let's talk about the House Governmental Affairs Committee hearing last Wednesday. And so the chairman asked for Representative Ray Gallifero, who was handling it in the House, to introduce his expert that was going to give testimony. And it was a Michael Ferris. Michael is a chancellor of Patrick Henry College in Virginia. He's a constitutional expert. He has testified numerous times before the Supreme Court. And he is, in fact, the one who has written the resolution that all 50 states are using. And then Chairman Donahue said, well, Senator Cortez, do you have anyone to give testimony? Yes, sir. And he introduced the 2 girls, Madeline Mautuk and Anna Grace Scheffler. And he proceeded to tell them how they accepted the civics challenge, and they were here to give testimony as well. And at that point, the chairman said, well, Senator Cortez, I need to ask you, who should this committee pay more attention to, Mr. Ferris or these two high school students? And for about 10 seconds, there's silence in the room. All of a sudden, Mr. Ferris grabs the microphone and said, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I was here 2 weeks ago, and I heard these girls' testimony at the Senate and Governmental Affairs Committee, and I would strongly suggest that this committee pay more attention to these two high school students.
Wow.
And so that kind of sets
the stage and the tone for sure.
I think when you have high school students, you take away a lot of the bias that comes from working in politics, having constantly seen it. You take these people who might have more common sense just because they're out of the loop on most of the politics surrounding it, and they know it. So I think that's really cool, really, really awesome for these girls.
That's an excellent point. Being in those committee hearings, and you're looking at these legislators, and especially the older guys, and I call older guys anyone over 50, but whether they were friend or foe, when those students got out there to talk, they all kind of had little smiles on their faces. Just the mere fact that, look at this, we're having the next generation get involved.
Step up to the plate,
and keep in mind, these girls are sophomores. Let me give you excerpts of their testimony. And I quote, "The federal government has expanded its authority and its will upon the entire nation, seeking to create one unified state as opposed to 50 sovereign states. We, the next generation, must seek to restore the Constitution's original intent. It's time for the states to take a stand and to save the future of our great nation." So it's
and that's
time
from a sophomore student.
Sophomore students. So it's time for the states to take a stand, and that is exactly what Article 5 is all about. The states.
Absolutely. If they wish to take back their power, they can vote to do so. They can vote to do it. We also had a discussion last week. We were talking about property taxes, and we had Dr. John Sutherland on as well. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to kind of do a tie-in with Steve Gardes and that issue and some of the things that we talked about on Friday as well. Coming up now on 7:49 here at KPEL. D2 Acadiana's Morning News. Robin Burney here with you. Steve Gardes, our guest, once again talking about the Convention of States, the testimony, where it is currently in the legislative process. And that discussion also kind of blending in with a conversation we had last week with Dr. John Sutherland. We were talking about property taxes and should only property owners vote on property taxes. And we were talking about constitutional issues. Steve, you have some thoughts on our discussion on Friday.
Very much so. The tipping point, and the question was, have we reached the tipping point where we have people that have, quote, no skin in the game making the decisions? And I would like to suggest that we are, in fact, there. And as those two STM students said, it is now time for the states to take a stand. And the reason why I say this, most people may not be aware of this, but do you realize that today over 50% of the voters, I'm saying voters, receive government entitlement welfare checks, and the vast majority of that group does not pay any taxes?
Wow.
Over 50% of the voters.
Wow.
And so I would suggest these people don't have skin in the game, but they're
making decisions.
They're making decisions on, well, you can about imagine how they vote. And so going a step further, and when you understand and realize that 70% of the federal government's budget is on entitlements, okay, and that's the reason why we are having deficits every year. That is the reason why the national debt has increased from $9 trillion to $19 trillion in only the last 7 years. And the other problem is Washington, they won't touch entitlements.
For years and years and years.
The next election is just way too important to have welfare reform. So stop and think about it. We're going bankrupt as a nation. paying for all of these welfare benefits, and it could be 51% by the time we get to the election with the illegal immigration and illegal voter registration that's taking place. But in any event, if you have 51% that don't think we have a problem and Washington won't touch it, does that mean America is doomed? No, it does not. That's why our founding fathers gave us Article 5 for the states to take back control in the event Washington, the federal government, ever got out of control.
And, you can make your voice heard. Make your voice heard to your legislators. It's an easy process. You can email them, you can call them, you'll have more information, and we'll be able to give it to you on our website. Steve, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today, and with this ongoing issue, because the majority of people who listen, say to themselves, well, I don't have time to get involved in the process, or I don't have this, or I don't have that. This is a passion of yours. This is a love of yours. But there are many people out there who are just like you, and we're glad we could at least give you a voice to be able to talk about your efforts in the issue.
And I appreciate it very much. And so, yes, rather than being totally in despair, there is a way, and it's in the Constitution, and our founding fathers had the foresight to put that in there in the event that the federal government
took way too much control. And
that's where we're at.
Steve Gardes has been our guest. Sir, thank you again so much for your time. We appreciate it, and we'll continue to keep up through the rest of this process. 2 weeks left of that legislative session.